Mhm. Okay, thank you very much for the kind invitation. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here. I would love to present in Turkish, and I should be able to do it, given that I lived in this country for 5 years in Istanbul, to be precise. But I haven't managed to learn that well, so I'll give the presentation in English. Again, it's great to see all people, different stakeholders coming to discuss impact investing and impact management systems. And what I want to do today in about 20 minutes is to guide you through the impact management framework at EBRD, and also say a couple of words about the impact report, the first impact report that the bank has released this year, which is publicly available if you're interested to read. But before I do that, first of all, I am director for impact at EBRD. We are a team of about 50 people. And what we do is we assess the impact. So we apply our impact management framework to all transactions approved by EBRD. We have a methodology. We are in charge of developing and improving the methodology over time. And every project is assessed through this methodology. We also do impact evaluations, analytical work, and contribute to other strategic pieces developed by the bank. So, but before I delve into that, let me say a few words about the EBRD and our mission. EBRD was established in the early 90s to support the transition to market economies in former Soviet Union countries. And over time, it has expanded into different countries, regions. I will say more about that. And the idea is that EBRD is promoting the development of sustainable private sector-led economies in the region in which it operates. And you will see this concept of well-functioning market economies again in the presentation. As I said, EBRD was established in 1991. It is owned by 73 countries. You see the shareholding structure there. The United States is the single largest shareholder, but EU countries own collectively 49% of the shares, but also our recipient countries, including Turkey, are shareholders of the bank. We have invested cumulatively since we've been established 214 billion. Last year, we have signed a record 16.5 billion euros, and this corresponds to a number of projects, more than 7,000 cumulatively, but last year we signed, approved 584 projects. We are fundamentally a private sector bank. 80% of the share of our net cumulative investment is private. The rest is, of course, in government-owned entities, including municipalities and ministries. And the green share of our investment is 58%, investing both in climate mitigation and adaptation. This is the regional coverage. Turkey is one of our biggest countries of operations. We have a big office in Istanbul and an office in Ankara. And from 2025, meaning from this year, we are expanding into sub-Saharan Africa, in particular in 6 countries that you see mentioned there: Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and Senegal. And so the story of EBRD is actually a story of geographic expansion from its original core to the MENA regions, the summit regions, as we call it, and now in expansion into sub-Saharan Africa. Now, going into the key principles that drive investment decisions of the bank, let me focus on the right-hand side of this slide, which basically explains that we have 3 principles guiding our financing. One is sound banking, which means that we look for profits, for returns in our investments. We are profitable institutions, and through our profits, we support our business, including our advisory and capacity building for authorities in the regions in which we operate. Additionality, which means that our financing should be additional to commercial financing, so we should not be crowding out commercial funding. And the third principle, which is the one that we care more about today in this discussion, is transition impact, which means that we focus on projects that bring systemic change to markets and institutions through the 6 transition qualities, which is something I will explain a bit later. But key here is this notion of transition. We use this term to indicate that we support, we originally supported centrally planned economies to transitions to market economies, but we kept this term to indicate what we are in for, which is again supporting the development of well-functioning market economies in our countries of operation. And we define what a well-functioning market, an open market-oriented economy is, what we try to achieve through our investments and policy work through 6 transition qualities, as we call them. And as you can see here, these are integrated, well-governed, competitive, resilient, green, and inclusive. And this is through our investments what we're trying to achieve. And again, I'll explain a bit more how we measure all of this. Clearly integrated has to do with integration in domestic and international market for goods, for services, capital, and labor. Well governed has to do with economic governance at the level of state institutions, but also, and most importantly, at the level of the firms in which we invest. So reflecting, relating that to corporate governance, climate governance, and so on. Competitive has to do with supporting innovation and competition, because we do believe that competition is a key driver of productivity and ultimately economic growth. Resilient has to do with the ability to withstand shocks and to go through shocks. And this is, of course, a theme that, of course, as expanded and has gained more importance over the years, given the many shocks, macroeconomic shocks, pandemic, war, which the EBRD has had to operate in. Green, I don't need to explain. Green economies are sustainable market economies, and we look at the green angle both from an adaptation and from a mitigation perspective, and inclusive, which of course has to do with equality of opportunity for all. This is, you can find this in our impact report. I'm not going to go, of course, through the details, but this is the way we represent our theory of change. If you are in impact investing, of course, you've heard this term quite a lot, theory of change, which describes how we go from our inputs, from our activities, which is essentially our financing, but also our technical assistance and policy dialogue, to our outcomes, both at the level of stakeholders, which is our clients, or stakeholders directly affected by our projects, so say the employees of the firms or the suppliers or a given client, but also, and most importantly, market outcomes. And this is where I want to briefly introduce this notion of systemic change, which is fundamentally what we're trying to achieve through our interventions. When I say interventions, I mean the combination of investments, advisory services, and policy engagements, which is the technical assistance that we provide to governments and governmental authorities in our countries of operations. What we are trying to achieve is structural change at the market level. And we do that supporting investments that have the ability to trigger market changes, to trigger market developments. This comes through a series of triggers, as we name them here. First of all, of course, the idea to change market structures through strengthening competition, introducing innovation in the marketplace, which will lead to replication by other players in the markets, developing skills that through our interventions that have the ability to diffuse and to spread in the market to again support this systemic or catalytic effect. And of course, one of the key drivers of systemic structural change is the work we do to support changes in institutions and regulations in our countries of operations. So again, this is our representation of our general theory of change. And again, if you look into our impact report, you'll find a clearer the description. So how does our impact management framework work? We have the 6 qualities, right, which we use to characterize the impact of everything we do. And the 6 qualities inform some of the most important diagnostic or strategic documents that the bank prepares: country sector strategies, country diagnostics, through which we assess the level of development of our countries of operations, again using the lenses of the 6 qualities. And this diagnostic work translates in what we call the assessment of transition challenges or transition qualities in our countries of operation, which is a data-driven system to assess the relative level of development or the gaps, the context against which we operate. Every investment is subject to ex-ante assessment, and I will say a bit more about this. And in the context of this ex-ante assessment, we develop indicators that we use for monitoring the achievements of our projects against any of the quality that is chosen that is particularly relevant for that project. And at the end of the project cycle, when the project is completed, when the investment is repaid, we do a final evaluation, which is subject to the validation also of our independent evaluation department. So to create feedbacks and loops, learning cycle that we can then incorporate into the development of new projects, but also policy interventions and country and sector strategies. Here, it's another way to explain our impact management for projects with a couple of acronyms that I'll try to mention in very simple terms. As I said, everything starts with the diagnostics phase, this assessment of transition qualities through which we identify the economy level or the sector level gaps against which we operate. We have an ex-ante assessment, which essentially consists in providing an impact score to every project. It's an expected impact score, and that's why it's called ETI, expected transition impact, which is used to capture the ambition of the projects. This score is very important because it's part of the institution's scorecard. So when we decide on what we call performance-based compensation, like a kind of bonus, the bank's ability to achieve its impact ex ante and ex post is one of the key factors influencing the decision on the amount of the reward that is provided to the bank's employees to incentivize, of course, the achievement of impact. Every project gets assessed and gets rated, and then through a series of indicators, we assess in monitoring the delivery of the impact. So we have measures of delivery rate, or as we call portfolio impact score, which is again part of the bank's scorecard. Then the project goes through a final assessment, as I mentioned, an ex post evaluation, and this in principle should support this learning cycle and learning loop. Every project is scored, as I said. Every project is assigned an expected transition impact score. And the factors that influence this score are, of course, the ambition of the project itself, the objectives that the project targets, which, again, are against any of the 6 qualities. So, for example, you may have an inclusive project that targets women's participation into business. And this, for example, would be the key quality for the Women in Business credit line. You may have a project in the corporate sector that supports innovation in any manufacturing sector, and this will contribute to the competitive quality. So for every project, we identify the qualities, we identify the specific objectives and their ambition. In particular, their ability to catalyze market change through the innovation angle and through the other triggers that I mentioned before. The other factors that contribute to the score are the size of the challenge being addressed, which is measured through the exercise that I was talking about before, the assessment of transition qualities, and the strategic relevance. We tend to assign larger scores, everything else equal, to project that fits with the country strategic priorities, which are defined through a cycle, a 5 years cycle. We are now working on a few changes in our impact assessment management system, and the key thing is to give more structure to the theory of change, because investors, impact investors, in general stakeholders, want to have much more clarity in how, through our projects, we go from the inputs, from the activities that we support, to the final outcomes, both at the level of the stakeholders, so the direct or effects of the projects, or the more indirect market level effects that I was referring to before. And so this idea that we have to strengthen our theory of change is what has driven our reform, which is not yet completed, over the last several months. And this is just to give you an example. This is something we don't explicitly do at the moment, but that we will do going forward. So, as I said, an explicit articulation of a theory of change. How do we go from the input, which is the provision of investments, advisory policy engagements, to the output, which is what the EBRD support to the clients, and through to the outcomes, both at the level of the stakeholders and at the level of the market. And here you can see an example of theory of change. Hopefully, this makes it a bit less abstract in the context of, say, a renewable energy project, right? Where we start from an assessment of the country context, and we will have data that will tell us how much, what is the penetration, for example, of renewable energy in a given country relative to other countries of operations. The input, which is, of course, the provision of green finance to our investee companies. The output, which is the installation of the renewable energy company. And then the outcomes, right? And the outcomes in this case at the level of stakeholders are the reduction of CO2 emissions. This is the direct effect of the project. And then the systemic change in this case could be linked to the demonstration effects that comes from supporting innovative renewable energy technologies in our countries of operations. Of course, the ability to trigger market change is very much linked to the context in which we operate. And let me conclude by saying a few words about the IMPA report. This has been a major effort for EBRD because all the impact management system, all the data that we were collecting were mainly an internal tool, were a tool that were used by our management and by our board to make decisions about how to allocate funding, how to prioritize investments. There was not for many years the idea that we should report to outside stakeholders all of this, right? Of course, we had reporting, sustainability reporting, and other specific areas of reporting because of these different international initiatives, like the Global Reporting Initiative, for example. But we didn't have an holistic impact report, and so to be able to do that, we had to make a significant shift, especially from a data governance perspective, to be completely sure that the quality and reliability of our data. And we've done that. We have, you will see if you go through the report, data across the different qualities, speaking both about our expected outcomes, but also our achieved outcomes. So not just the impact that is expected from the deals that we signed last year, but also the cumulative impact that we have achieved over the years. There's still much more work to be able to improve the quality of our data and the breadth of our data, but a significant journey has started there. And then you'll see thematic chapters, again, anchored on the priority areas of intervention of the bank in the green transition, the human capital development, the digitalization, and the financial market development space, where there's attached to the numbers, you'll see a lot of stories, you'll see a lot of case study, you'll see a lot of narratives, because essentially, and this is something we were discussing over lunch, impact is not just a matter of numbers. It's not just a matter of how many people you reach, how many women your company employs. It is also a journey that takes time. It is a journey of market transformation where different investments accumulate their effect over time. And this is very difficult. This dynamic, complex element is very difficult to capture in numbers. And this is where narratives become very, very important. And this is again why we have combined figures, numbers with narrative and stories that hopefully will tell the overall impact of EBRD. This is a link where you can find it, and I hope I more or less stayed in the time allocated, and I hope you get a sense of how, an institutions like EBRD, a development financial institution, a multilateral development bank, looks at impact in the context of its investment projects. Thank you very much.
Sayın Lorenzo Ciari'ye sunumları için teşekkür ediyoruz. We would like to thank Mr. Ciari for his valuable presentation.